Am I muted? I don't think I'm muted. Okay, she says I was muted. Um, so I'm a little that threw me off. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Richard Nixon, the CIA, and how it's possibly a CIA operation. And if this is the first time you've watched the show, we are a radio program first and foremost. We record here live on YouTube, and then I edit this recording down for the radio when we put it on WBAI and the Progressive Radio Network. So let's go ahead and bring on Gloria and Jeremy, our host for Uncontrolled Opposition. Hello. Am I still muted?
Hey, no, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't think I was muted. I didn't change anything when you called me. So,
Oh, okay.
okay.
Well, now I can hear you.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and bring on Wayne. We'll say hello to Wayne. How are you doing?
Just fine.
Hey.
We are going to start the show right now, and let's just do it because we're already running late because we had to solve audio issues. So let's get this started. I'm handing off to Gloria. She's going to do her monologue, and we're going to have a good show. Let's do it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jamie Stiles. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI or the Pacifica Foundation. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. As we approach the August 9th anniversary of Richard Nixon's resignation from the presidency, we're pleased to welcome back a very special guest, Wayne Stiles, one of the last living firsthand witnesses to one of the most consequential political events in American history. Wayne served on the FBI's major criminal squad during the Watergate investigation. He was part of the FBI's team that connected the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters to the Committee to Re-elect the President, derisively known as CREEP. Today, he is not only surviving member of the FBI team to have made, I'm going to reread this, sorry, Jamie. Wayne served on the FBI's major critical squad during, I'm going to try this one more time. It's an audio day. Wayne served on the FBI's major criminal squad during the Watergate investigation. He was part of the FBI team that connected the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters to the Committee to Re-elect the President, derisively known as CREEP. Today, he is the only surviving member of that FBI team to have made that connection. His perspective is invaluable because it comes from someone who was there, working the case from the inside. Today's discussion builds on Jeremy's article, Would Liberals Have Cheered Nixon's Resignation 50 years ago if they knew the CIA was behind it? It was published by Covert Action magazine on August 9th, 2024. In that article, Jeremy examines an alternate interpretation of Watergate presented by several authors who argue that intelligence agencies were behind Nixon's downfall. While the conventional narrative portrays Watergate as an open and shut case of a power-hungry man seeking re-election who directed others to break laws for his continued political importance, a more sophisticated and comprehensive line of inquiry asks three poignant questions. Who from the intelligence community orchestrated the Watergate break-in? Who from the intelligence community sabotaged it? And lastly, who benefited from Nixon's removal? A classic CIA technique to bring down a given target is to identify their illicit wants and then provide them in spades. This is the old adage, give a man enough rope and he'll hang himself. Sadly, it works every time. People willingly take the bait and compromise whatever is left of their ethics. Then all that's needed is to catch the given target in their predicted and prescribed deplorable act. This is more frequently achieved through sex, drugs, and monetary payouts. But in the case of Richard Nixon, the ring through his nose was the great allure of continued power as President of the United States of America. Keep in mind, a good setup enables an easy takedown. Well, every once in a while, someone with executive power attempts to forward an agenda that actually makes sense for our country, such as world peace. However, when unbridled war profiteering is threatened, the military industrial complex and bankers unleash their private intelligence operatives to whip the foolishly self important politician back in line, or if necessary, remove or eliminate them. Case in point, Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy. By 1972, Nixon had fundamentally altered U.S. foreign policy. His opening to China and his purpose and his pursuit of détente with the Soviet Union, including the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT, reduced tensions between the world's two largest nuclear powers. These policies also coincided with a period of declining defense expenditures as the Vietnam War wound down. Then came Watergate to the rescue. Nixon resigned. Gerald Ford became president. Nelson Rockefeller became vice president. Henry Kissinger remained Secretary of State. During the Ford administration, a number of neocon warhawks who would later become central figures in U.S. national security rose up rapidly through the ranks. Alexander Haig became NATO's Supreme Allied Commander in Europe before later serving as Secretary of State. Donald Rumsfeld advanced from NATO ambassador to White House Chief of Staff and then Secretary of Defense. Dick Cheney, only 34 years old, became Ford's White House Chief of Staff, the youngest person to ever hold that position at the time. Paul Wolfowitz worked in the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency under Nixon, then served in the Pentagon under Ford. He was involved in Team B, which challenged détente-friendly intelligence. So we'll examine the evidence, revisit the investigation with someone who participated in it firsthand, discuss Jeremy's article, and explore one of the enduring questions surrounding Watergate. Was Nixon a casualty of peace with China and the Soviet Union? Was Ford the harbinger? Was Ford the harbinger of death through perpetual war with the elevation of Rumsfeld, Cheney, and Wolfowitz? Wayne, welcome back to Uncontrolled Opposition. It's a pleasure to have you with us again. Please tell us blow by blow about your historic experiences in the Watergate investigation as an FBI agent. Thanks.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you once again this morning. I will tell you that following my naval career, 5 years as a Navy helicopter pilot, I entered Bureau new agent training, and a year and a half later, I found myself in the Miami office in my third assignment. I found myself on the major criminal squad, which was very, very fortunate for me because not only did we get some of the more interesting cases, but I had the benefit of all of the senior agents that were on the squad as far as learning the ropes and helping me in my own career. So I will jump forward to the Monday morning that I came into work, and the squad secretary grabbed each one of us as we came in and said, "Do not leave the office." So I will tell you that in those days, we always went out for a cup of coffee and a Danish. So there was none of that. We all stayed in the office. And at 9 o'clock, we had an all squad meeting. And the supervisor told us he had a stack of blank memos on his desk.
Wayne, just for perspective, how old were you at this time?
I was 31. So he had a stack of blank memos on his desk, and he said, "Take these, put a heading on each one of your pending cases, and put them in pending and active." So every agent on the squad took every single case that they had and made them into pending and active. He said, "We are going to work one case and one case only, and it is the interception of communications violation, which occurred this weekend in Washington, D.C., and then he gave us all the background. So can you imagine 14 agents in a major city doing nothing else but work on one case it was over 4 months. So we were fully immersed in that case. Now, as a fairly new agent, I was always the number 2 person on interviews, and the leads that we got were not the most significant on the squad, but I was fortunate to participate in the interview of Frank Sturgis, also the interview of Bernard Barker's wife. So one morning, the older agent that was in charge of the case said, "Hey, we have one car that's we still have not been able to locate, and it's the vehicle owned by Virgilio, can't remember his last name.
Fernandez.
I don't remember his last name right at this moment. It'll come to me. But anyway, he was the lock guy. Gonzalez, Virgilio Gonzalez. He was the lock man. And they said, we've located all the other vehicles, and we really need to find this. So I took a junior agent, junior to me, out to the airport, and we drove around all the parking lots in Miami International, and we did find the car. So we called back to the office, and the office designated us to stay there guarding the car until someone from the office could come out with a search warrant. So it was critical because the plumbers were going to be released on bond, and they didn't want them coming down there and finding that vehicle before we could gain access to it.
Just for our audience that might not be familiar with this, the Plumbers was a name that was assigned to them by the FBI?
Yeah, either that or the media or both.
But they weren't really plumbers. They were
the people who broke in. Yeah, for the young people who don't know about the Watergate, it was a break-in of the Democratic National Committee by operatives linked with Richard Nixon and also the CIA, and it was carrying out illegal activity, breaking into these offices and stealing material that could benefit the Republican and Nixon during the the election was coming up. 72 election. This was in 1971.
Yes, and I might mention parenthetically that I voted for Nixon twice and was fully involved in the investigation of him and his, assistants, his aides, and all. In those days, there was no political allegiance where it involved cases. Cases were investigated straight up. The results were forwarded on to the U.S. Attorney's Office. There was no such thing as a Democratic agent, a Republican agent, or an independent agent. There was just an FBI special agent. So to get back to the vehicle, some of the men from the office came and they had a search warrant, and they basically said, "Okay, you guys, we got it." So we didn't even participate in the search. The other agents did. But in the trunk of the vehicle belonging to Virgilio Gonzalez was a deposit slip for the Republic National Bank reflecting the deposit of a $25,000 check, which had been written by Kenneth Dahlberg. Kenneth Dahlberg was a Republican fundraiser and prominent donor to the Republican Party and to President Nixon in particular. And I know for a fact they went and got a subpoena from the Republic National Bank, and they were able to actually get a copy of the check itself. So they were able to trace it back through Dahlberg to the donation that he made directly to the committee. He claimed he didn't know if it was to the committee or to Maurice Stans directly, but it wound up in the account of Bernard Barker, one of the Watergate break-in people. He had a business account at the Public National Bank. So that's how the connection was made between that group and the committee to reelect the president.
So just to dumb this down a bit, so basically this was the payoff.
Well, I would say in retrospect that it was meant to finance the whole operation. I think it was meant to purchase the electronic equipment. It was used to pay for the airline tickets, the rental cars, anything that they would incur in Washington, D.C. That is just purely my opinion based on hundreds of investigations that I've done in my career. But yeah, I think that was meant to.
So these were funds used to finance the operation itself, in your belief. These were not
In my opinion, correct.
Clarifying.
And wouldn't that be a bit suspicious? Because what later historians have found is that it was likely a setup, as Gloria was pointing out. I mean, how sloppy? If this is a sophisticated operation, with such high stakes, why would he leave the receipts in the car? I mean, how could he be so stupid? These are supposedly some of the most professional, and these guys have background in Cuba, in the anti-Castro operations, and have worked with the CIA. So they're supposedly top professionals. How could they leave that kind of evidence behind that would implicate them?
Yeah, those are all good questions, and one or more of these guys were veterans of the Bay of Pigs, that debacle, and but who knows what those answers are. Dahlberg supposedly wrote the check to himself. It was a cashier's check, and supposedly it was co-endorsed by Barker in order to get it into the account at the bank. But when you talk about sloppiness, I was second chair on the interview of Frank Sturgis, who also used the alias of Frank Fiorini. He was one of the Watergate burglars. And I remember specifically the interviewing the senior agent, asking him about the tape on the door. And it went like this. I put a tape on the latch of the door because it was a panic bar type of door, and every time we went in with a box of equipment or something, we had to knock on the door and have somebody open the door from inside, and it was just slowing us down. So he said, I put a tape on the latch. Well, the security guard for the Watergate came around on his normal rounds and saw the tape, figured that it was from the daytime shift of workers, and took it off the door and continued his rounds. Well, Sturgis claimed that I came out, I noticed the tape was missing, figured one of our guys had taken it off, so I put it back on. And the guard came around and said, aha, I remember taking that tape off. So that's how they were arrested. So that was pretty sloppy too.
Yeah. And Sturgis, what do you know about his background? I mean, he's kind of implicated in all these CIA operation, right? The Kennedy assassination. I even read about him in the Edward Kennedy. Looks like it was a setup at Chappaquiddick. I think we did a show about that. But Sturgis seems to appear everywhere, and I think he was involved with the Bay of Pigs before. So can you say something more about his background?
I don't know a lot about his background, but
okay.
I remember that later on in Miami, I was investigating, and I've tried so hard to remember who this woman was. She was headquartered in I believe in the Bahamas, and she was an advance fee, like Ponzi type of swindler. And I interviewed her at length about the case, and she told me during the interview that she had a book, a rough manuscript that had been written by Frank Sturgis. And I took it as evidence. And submitted it to the case file, never saw it again. But I often over the years, and it has been a lot of years, I've often thought, I wonder what that manuscript contained, because I never had the time to read it. And it was probably about 3 inches thick.
I just want to go back to that parking lot because I find that really fascinating. So you're this 31-year-old agent, right? 31, and you've just got this whole thing from your command that this is so important that all these agents are working on this at the same time. Everything's pushed off everyone's desk, and you're in the parking lot, and you find the car, and you held the receipt.
No, that was obtained later after the search warrant arrived, and we had already left because, in a lot of these situations, the senior people like to come in and take charge. Now, we were mentioned, myself and Doug Knight, who is now deceased, we were mentioned in the affidavit for the search warrant, but that was it. We didn't participate anymore in that part of the case. So I presume that the senior case agent took charge of the financial aspects. The interesting thing about this is that Bernstein and Woodward claimed that, they came down to Miami and they got with Dardis, who was the investigator for the Dade County state attorney. They got with Dardis. Dardis gave them a copy of this check. That was when they first knew that the committee to reelect the president was connected with the break-in, except that we had this information well before that. And I've always wondered, how did Dardis get a copy of that check? Unless he got it from the bank, which would have been illegal, or some agent leaked it to him, or somebody from the U.S. Attorney's Office. But all of a sudden, Bernstein and Woodward and Bernstein were debuting this stuff as something that they had uncovered, when in fact we had uncovered it quite a bit before that.
So just going back to the parking lot again. So you're with a junior agent, you're driving around in a car, and you spot this car.
Correct.
Okay.
We had the license number.
So you identified this car.
Yes, they had given us, I imagine they had in the case earlier, all the vehicles registered to the people that were involved in the break-in. So we knew the one that was unaccounted for. We had the license number and the description of the vehicle. And
then once you made, identification of this, then you call that in, and then the bigwigs came and opened it up and looked for stuff.
Correct.
So really nobody knows except somebody higher up in the food chain what was there.
That's correct. But as you and your experts probably know, following a federal search warrant, you have to have an inventory. Actually, you have to leave the inventory in the car, a copy, and the other copy would have been transmitted to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The original would have been made evidence like anything else, but the inventory from the search would have listed all the things taken out of the car, and I never saw that.
Then you never got to see the inventory?
No, I did not.
Wow.
And so what was that? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, my question was did you have further involvement with this case, or that was it?
That was pretty much it. I did interview second chair with Bernard Barker's wife. I guess he was out of pocket or didn't agree to an interview, whatever. But they cut a lot of us loose at a certain point, and they had a reduced number of people working on the case for at least a few months after that. But one of the interesting things, I don't know if Jeremy, if you find this interesting, but prior to Watergate, our foreign counterintelligence agent in the bureau there in Miami would meet with the head of station of the CIA in Miami once a month. They would sit down for lunch. They would swap information. Very, very good relationship. They would even exchange leads. Hey, could you find this out? Because it was pretty strict. We couldn't do anything international, and they couldn't do anything domestic. And I believe Howard Hunt was of all people, was the head of station in Miami. And Ed Dunn, who's now deceased, was the FBI agent who would have met with him, because I remember speaking with Ed during the case, and he says, heck, I used to have lunch with them once a month and shared information. Well, following the Watergate hearings, Congress passed a law which forbade the FBI and the CIA from sharing information at the operational level. Meetings like that came to a halt. They no longer, it was an overreaction, I think, to the Nixon trying to use the CIA to derail our investigation of Watergate. So we were no longer allowed at the operational level to swap information and leads and anything like that. I got the memo at my desk. We all got memos saying, in the future, if you have anything for the CIA, you put it in a, quote, plain brown wrapper, meaning a piece of paper with no heading, no identification on it. You just write it up and send it up to Washington headquarters. They would send it over to the CIA headquarters. And then, who knows? Did it go back to the field? I don't know. Who would know? They would know. But anyway, the information effectively stopped being shared except at the upper levels. And how that was parsed up there, who knows? But prior to 9/11, both the CIA and the FBI had information about some of the hijackers. It was not shared. So who was blamed? The agencies.
Well, from your standpoint, you would say that when you compartmentalize information, you are better able to maintain secrets. If you have two people knowing something, it's a secret. Once you have three people knowing something, it's no longer a secret. And in this situation, by controlling this interaction between the CIA and FBI at lower levels, what you're saying is that it became more secretive.
Well, at least it routed the information, Gloria, to the top of both agencies where it could be controlled. I mean, that's just a personal opinion. When you're at the operational level, you become friends with people. You learn to trust them. You develop relationships over time. And I don't know if they were trying to interrupt that or what, but there's a young lady that I think she has a YouTube channel. I know she's on Substack, but her name is Colleen Rowley.
Oh yes, yeah, we know her. Yeah, she's.
Did you see her? Did you see her write up? I mean, what she encountered? She was the principal legal advisor in the Minneapolis FBI office.
Yeah, 9/11. Yeah.
Yes, instructors at the local commercial aircraft instructors at the local airport came to her and said, "We've got some Middle Eastern men here trying to learn how to fly commercial airliners. They want to learn how to take off and fly en route, but they don't want to learn how to land." So she made up I don't know how long it was, but it was a very thorough memo asking that the FISA court be approached for warrants for their communications, their email, their cell phones, their banking records and all. And the Bureau actually resisted that and tied her up for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it never got done for some reason.
Well, many people consider 9/11 a let it happen event. Others consider it an inside job. There's a lot of controversy with 9/11.
Yep, there is.
And related to what you're saying about E. Howard Hunt, that's quite interesting because I think he officially left the CIA, but then he was working for the Mullen Plumbing Company, Mullen Corporation, that was known to be a CIA front. But that certainly was not advertised that he was the Miami CIA chief or liaison. And then he was one of the key principal figures in the Watergate. So I don't know what connection you see there, but he's obviously very central to all the intrigues of Watergate. And I don't know, maybe he was the one who tipped the FBI or tipped this guy, if it was a setup, if these historians are correct, that this was a setup to get rid of Nixon, a neoconservative coup, as Gloria pointed out. And I think she's drawing on some books. There have been some books published making this argument, like Jim Hoogan was the first who argued this back in the late 70s, and Glenn Kolodny, and then there have been some more recent books, including by Nick Bryant. But Hunt is at the center of all these intrigues. So, but it'd be hard to know, since he's such a tricky and deceptive guy, what he was actually doing in that position as Miami station chief is hard to discern. But I would speculate that he was actually the one tipping off the FBI, and that if it was indeed all a setup, and that he tipped off, because Woodward also has connection to intelligence agencies, and he worked for it's in the top admiral, and he has a background in Navy intelligence. Mm-hmm. And if this was an intelligence operation, the neoconservative coup, then, and Woodward was the key guy, to get this out there and to create this front story, because the CIA is very good in creating front stories and getting liberals to really cheerlead what was in effect a neoconservative coup. So Woodward, they created this persona of him as this great muckraking journalist who unearthed this story, and it was also a way to kind of preserve the integrity of the American media after the exposure of Operation Mockingbird, and the integrity of the American system. That, the system worked. We had a bad guy as president, and look, the press exposed him, but really he was being tipped off by probably Hunt through this guy you were saying, Dardis. And Hunt, I think, was the mastermind. And Hunt was a brilliant guy. He wrote all these spy novels that were basically coded novels that actually it's alleged that a lot of it was designed to throw off the KGB, who they know would read it. But some of it was true to life stories. But he was a brilliant guy, although arguably a devious guy. So I don't know if you have any thoughts as to what Hunt's role may have been.
I don't, but wasn't Mark Felt a convenient straw man?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Mark Felt was the guy that told it all. And
was he Deep Throat, right?
Pardon?
Yeah,
Felt was Deep Throat.
Yeah, he was the official Deep Throat, and that's the thing. Like, nobody would actually know. Like, in your job, you're doing your job as an FBI agent, and but nobody would really know except the people at the top who are masterminding this whole thing, and then they continue to pull the wool over the American public for generations, really. And most of the history textbook, and I think historians are complicit, just like I think we've discussed, like in the JFK assassination, they continue to promote the official cover story, even though more and more evidence comes to light, and real muckraking journalists like Jim Hoogan, who wrote this book, and I think it was published around 1980, and then more recent scholarship, but that doesn't make its way into the high school or college level textbooks or courses that students take. It's more on the fringe, and it doesn't get any it doesn't get reviewed in the New York Times, or those books you can't find on Barnes and Noble. It's just like a few specialists maybe, or who've read those books, like very small readership who know. It comes out over time, but it doesn't make its way into the official history. So the students in high school or college don't learn that real story, and then it gets buried.
Well, I'd like to talk about my personal experience. I was a kid, and this movie came out, All the President's Men, and I saw it, and I believed it. And there's these two cute guys. I forgot which actors they are. Dustin Hoffman was one of them, and then
it was a great movie. Yeah.
And then who was the other one?
Robert Redford.
Robert Redford.
Yeah. So top acting talent.
Two great actors, great story. It's just not true, and you believe it as a kid. You really do. And then
But I think most adults believe it too. They still
right.
believe it.
But the thing is, when they make a movie out of it and they use attractive actors who are talented,
and that's part of the covert operation, because Hollywood, I've studied this and I've done articles. Go ahead.
It stops your inquiry. I was satisfied that this is what happened. I didn't look any further. I didn't feel inquisitive. I just stopped right there. And it puts the kibosh on critical thinking. You have something, it seems to make sense. And Jeremy, we're going through this right now with the octopus murders. I mean, it's two, reasonably attractive young guys, and they're doing this Netflix movie, the series, and it's all lies. It's all limited.
And they present themselves as muckrack. I think part of the trick, the psychological trick, is that you identify with them as these crusaders for truth, and great journalists. Like, that's how Woodward had that reputation. So liberals, who are all about exposing the truth and rooting out corruption in government and powerful people, exposing them. And Nixon, the perfect foil, because he was he did a lot of bad thing, like with Vietnam, and he was kind of shady guy if you look into the Alger Hiss case and stuff, and he was always hated by liberals. So this is the perfect storyline. Get rid of the bad guy, of these liberal crusading journalists as the hero, and meanwhile this is a neoconservative coup, as you pointed out. It's bringing in these far right war hawks like Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, and it's the start that's led us into the Project the New American Century on the Iraq War, and some of the nightmares we've experienced. So it's a brilliant PR, and Hollywood is key often in spinning that narrative, and I think the target often is the liberals, and they're often the most gullible and naive about these kind of things.
And I just want to say, I didn't read this article of yours until we were prepping for the show, and it took me down a rabbit hole. It was fantastic. I really recommend everyone reads Jeremy's article, and I think Jamie will put it up in the notes. So it took me down this rabbit hole, and I started looking at the relationship between the players. And I started looking at Rockefeller in particular. He had run, I think, 3 times for president. Maybe you guys are historians and have better experience than, but I think it was about 3 times he ran for president, and he didn't make it. So now all of a sudden he becomes vice president. He just gets put right in when they take Nixon out. And I think that's a really important thing. And then, one of our viewers and friends had sent me an email a text message right before the show. And she was saying that there were, I think, 3 attempts on Ford's life. I don't know if you've tracked that also. So, they really have a very tight leash on presidents. And the other thing that I came across in my research for this show was the connection between Rockefeller, Bush, and the connection between Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and I can't say this, Wolfowitz. And, so this was like a whole cabal that really was just waiting to get in, and so connected to the military industrial complex and the bankers, which is a very key thing. And it takes us back to, a lot of work that you've done, Jeremy, on, Smedley Butler and all wars are bankers' wars. And that kept coming up. So, basically, this is a pretty interesting point in history. And I'm very happy to have, kind of stumbled on it through the work of both of you gentlemen. Thank you.
I always wondered what impact on the case there would have been if Hoover had not passed away a couple of months prior to Watergate. I mean, I wonder if he would have had any, he provided any steering currents or any, blockage to what they were trying to do, or because he was number 150% devoted to the Bureau and its reputation. he would not have allowed the Bureau to be used in any way, shape, or form. So I've always, being an old-time agent, I've always wondered if he was around, what impact that might have had, if any.
And that begs a side question. What was it like working under Hoover? Since he was ultimately...
Oh, that's another show. That's a whole different show, Jeremy.
Yeah, I know.
Have to do that one. The other thing that I came across was the relationship between Rockefeller and Kissinger, because everybody was removed except for Haig and Kissinger. And Kissinger really landed on his feet. He was, involved in Nixon's détente, which really pissed off the other people, but yet he remained Secretary of State. And he has a very long connection to Rockefeller. So I think that was a very interesting connection to see.
Yeah. And I think what we see is because Nixon was more, that's a big shift as far as the Republican Party, because Nixon, although he was reviled by liberals, he was representative more of the moderate Republican wing of the Eisenhower era, where and he said we're all Keynesians now. He more or less embraced like the New Deal and more extended government program as far as the welfare state. He preserved New Deal program. He created the Environmental Protection Agency. So there's a lot of kind of activist government. And then in foreign policy, he was kind of all over the map, but he was working toward a détente. He was kind of continuing the Kennedy project after the Cuban Missile Crisis, moving toward détente with the Soviet Union, arms control, opening with China. And so his removal and disgrace allowed the neoconservative faction to take over the party, led by Ronald Reagan, and they had their base more in the states with a strong connection to the military-industrial complex and the aerospace, and also extractive industries. And Reagan was very hostile toward the Environmental Protection Agency, and he really advanced more right-wing positions, including in domestic arena of really cutting back on regulations, business, cutting back government program, and starting to chip away at the New Deal. And that ushered in major transformation in American government. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. And I think they had their eye on getting Reagan, the far right, in. And Carter was just a brief interregnum, and 76 to 80. And actually, what I found in my research on Carter, Carter was also a more conservative Democrat who enacted the biggest military buildup in peacetime in American history to that time, and advanced in all these high-tech military industry kind of behind the scenes. So, but I think they knew, and Carter was kind of a weak president. So I think they had their eye on the neoconservative or far right, had their eye on taking over the Republican Party and then ultimately gaining the presidency. And that was the big picture. And then, I would agree, they maybe kept Kissinger around because of his tie with Rockefeller, and they're purging it was really a purge, a coup and a purge. And that gets to the heart, like in the book I have coming out on political assassinations, the tenets like American exceptionalism is that America is pure democracy and doesn't have these coups or purges like in the Soviet Union. But really, our system is actually not that different. It has features of more totalitarian systems where you have these coups and purges. And that's what I think occurred here. But they're very good at public relations and sustaining this illusion that it was this democracy at work, and that these liberal journalists help expose Nixon the bad guy and revitalize the American democracy. Because don't forget, that was a time also of great growing cynicism toward government because of the abuses in the Vietnam War and the COINTELPRO and all that was coming out. So Watergate, they kind of spun it to reaffirm faith in the American system and in the independence of the media, when really Woodward was actually tied with the intelligence agencies and the deep state.
Yeah, it's another veil ripped from our eyes. It's just amazing how much we believe based on these movies and this narrative. And, then we find out the truth that's like, oh, ouch. Another thing that I believe that I don't believe anymore. It makes
I mean, most people still, it's hard to get at that truth because, unless you're somebody who read these obscure books, there's like a bookworm or a history buff, or you watch these kind of shows. But very few people have read those books that have kind of unearthed a bigger story, like the Jim Hoogan book and this Nick Bryant, because my article was based on a review of a book by Nick Bryant. And actually, there was one other angle he goes into, which was that they were covering up like these sex crimes that were going on in the DNC. That was another aspect of why they were breaking in there. And Brian argued that John Dean, rather than Nixon, it was actually John Dean was a key figure in the Nixon administration who was worried about some of the information because I think his wife was involved in these sex pot, like the CIA and DNC are running these sex pot honeypot operation where they use women to entrap powerful people or blackmail them. And this was going on through the Democratic National Committee, and this had to be covered up. So that was another reason for the break-in, not only, I think, to this what Brian argues, at least, and I think he's quite convincing, to A, get this neoconservative coup, and B, protect this illegal sex honeypot operation that implicated John Dean and his wife and a lot of powerful people within, I think, both parties, although largely maybe Democrats, and the CIA was connected with it. And we know the CIA has a pattern of that, using honeypots to entrap people or blackmail them. So that's another underside of American political life that was buried, and that Woodward, of course, didn't divulge any of that.
Who was that politician that said, "You won't get me. You're not going to find me with a dead girl or a live boy"?
I don't know. But remember, we had Scott Ritter. We had Scott Ritter on our show, who was very well known for exposing the WMD. At one point, he was like a celebrity because he helped expose the WMD in Iraq, and he was had a background in marine intelligence, and he's very good-looking, charismatic guy, eloquent speaker. So he was being groomed for political position. And he said when we interviewed him on the show that he went to Washington and they brought these beautiful girls to his hotel room and invited him to a party. And then somebody warned him, said, "Don't go. They're trying to trick you and entrap you because you're being groomed for a political position. But there are other people who don't want to ruin you." And he was told, "Get out of Washington," which he did. But he never ran for office because he was kind of scared after.
Well, two things we discuss a lot on our show are the things that motivate people. And the CIA knows how to do it. I mean, if they want to break up a group, they find the points of disagreement and then they expand upon them. Or if they find the human weaknesses in people, they expand upon that too. So if somebody has a drinking problem, they encourage that. If somebody has a drug problem, they make sure that they have a complete supply of heroin or cocaine or whatever it is. If the person has an interest in sex with underage people or women or men or boys or girls, they ensure that there's a conduit that delivers that too. And that's how you take people out. You take people out through their illicit wants and needs. And with Nixon, he wasn't really a good-looking guy, so it was easy not to like him. First of all, if he looked like Robert Redford, it might have been a little hard. Like Kennedy, was a good-looking guy. So you have Nixon that's like that, and Nixon really was motivated by position. He really wanted to be, he wanted to remain president. That was how you got him.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to have to apologize. I grabbed a backup computer and I'm almost out of power. So
okay.
Wayne, where can we find you?
Rather than just disappear.
Okay. It's
Where-
great to have you on, and I've learned a lot. So I'm going to add that in any future articles. Some of the stuff you said.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to read you. I'm going to read more of your stuff. So
Understand that, or even just in teaching, because I teach courses in American history. I try and teach students the real history, and so to have a firsthand, FBI guy who was investigating Watergate, and some of the things you were saying would lend to my conclusion. As far as the setup. But very interesting what you had to say, and important historical material.
So,
I've enjoyed it so much.
where could our audience see some of your work?
I wrote some articles on the Liberty on Substack and also on Medium.com, but I haven't written on the Watergate thing too much because, when you look back, you don't think you played a particularly big role, but then you read the things that like Jeremy is writing and other people are writing, and you say, wow. It's like the Navy when I was talking to you about that. You just go on and do your next case. It's just,
And for our audience who hadn't seen Wayne on our earlier show, Wayne Stiles came on to talk about his experience as a rescue pilot, rescuing people off the USS Liberty.
Yeah, and I flew surveillance for the bureau in Miami, and I did that for about 8 years in addition to working cases. So, you did your part, and you went on to the things that you were assigned directly to you, and I was just lucky to participate. All right, guys, pleasure to see you. I'm going to click off because I'm about ready to drop out.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I think what he was saying was interesting about how easily what kind of criminal who's participating in such an important operation, and these are seasoned professionals, would leave that information in the car that slips from the check. And they're not stupid. These guys are pros. So to me, that just is further evident. And again, I would include that information, might update this article, or certainly because I teach these topics to students, I'll definitely be highlighting that, because it's just further evidence that this was a setup. And I think the motives were spelled out in the Bryant book. Most importantly, with the neoconservative coup, and the side benefit with the covering up of these sex honeypot operations, because when they broke in, I think they did steal some documents that related to that. And I think it's important the role that the media played and Hollywood played with this film, All the President's Men, because that was a blockbuster, and they got the right actors. It was a brilliant production. It's a great film, tremendous actors. And that really got people who are in like the counterculture ethos, they loved that film. And Woodward was the hero, but really he's an intelligence asset. And I think he worked for Admiral Moore. And look at his latter career. He did all these kind of puffy books, like on the Bush White House, Bush at War. That was Woodward's book. It was just like a puffy book about a kind of triumphalist, making Bush look good and planning all these devastating war that killed millions of people. And that's where his career ended up. And he did a fawning one of Obama too. He had a follow-up Obama war, and he never goes into all the civilians who were killed and the consequences, like the Libya war on the Libyan population that plunged that country into utter despair and brought back slavery and empowered these violent extremists. He doesn't address that at all. So that's it's just a hatchet job.
Well, one thing I want to comment on a little bit is how they find this stuff. I was at 9/11. I was walking around there right afterwards because I work in that area. We discussed this in an earlier show, and there was nothing there. There's really nothing there. But this miraculous passport of Muhammad Atta just floats down from the sky. There's nothing there, folks. Nothing. No chairs, no desks, nothing. And the passport floats down.
A clean passport somehow survived the wreckage.
and someone picks it up and just hands it to a police officer, and then they know who did it because they have the passport. I mean, like, you just can't do better than that. And then, our new audience, you have Luigi Mangione, and they catch him with his backpack. And I just want to read what they find in his backpack. They find a 9mm ghost gun. Okay. And they find a 3D printed suppressor, a silencer. Then they find a loaded magazine with ammunition. They find a red notebook that has basically a manifesto. Then they have a handwritten to-do list. And what else? A cell phone, a passport, USB drives, fake identity, cash, and then they had a whole bunch of other miscellaneous items. So this is a guy that just shoots someone and kills them in cold blood, goes to McDonald's afterwards with all of this incriminating evidence in his backpack. I mean, what do they show you in like, the cute movies? Is the first thing you do is you get rid of the evidence. You don't carry it around. And I remember Jamie brought this up in one of our other episodes, our engineer producer. He's like, well, I mean, who has a manifesto? Who walks around with a manifesto in their back pocket or in their backpack? I mean, like, come on.
Well, unless they want to get caught.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I mean, in the Watergate, again, it's astounding that these professional criminal and intelligence operatives would leave that incriminating evidence. And it reminded me of the Oklahoma City bombing, where he supposedly pulls off one of the greatest criminal feats of all time, bombing a federal building, and yet the getaway vehicle had no license plate. So he's automatically going to be pulled over. I mean, so, talk about, criminals 101. I mean, if they can pull off these, like, as you say, although I haven't looked as much into the Mangione case, but assassinating a top healthcare executive, bombing a federal building, I mean, obviously there's some major planning and expertise, and usually one lone, oddball cannot do these kind of things, cannot pull something like that off. It has to be a vast criminal operation. And if the escape vehicle has no license plate, that it's a setup, just like what you're saying. And just like with the Watergate, if he's leaving all the incriminating information, and if E. Howard Hunt is the Miami station chief, that would the other interest, because that's never been reported in any books, and a lot's been scrutinized about Hunt's career. So if Hunt is the Miami station chief, he's obviously masterminding all of this and coordinating it. And he's one of the CIA's top mastermind, and Hunt is an incredibly brilliant guy. I mean, I think he was devious. He was involved with the JFK assassination and all kinds of devious stuff abroad, but he certainly was a very high level IQ. He was one of the agency's top people who can plan these operations very effectively. And he only got a few years. He did go to jail for that, because he was one of the plumbers. Him and James McCord were two CIA people on the plumbers, but his prison sentence was reduced to, I think, a few months. So that's often, when they get a prison sentence to make it look like justice was being served, but then their sentence gets reduced and they end up serving just like a couple months in prison. And that's for them their cost of doing business. Just like the CEO, he pays a light fine when he's made billions of dollars, and he has to pay a few million. That's his cost of doing business, but it's nothing for him.
I think we're caught up and running out of time.
Okay.
Let's see if I get a message from Jamie. I think I got a message from Jamie. So,
well, and this is an important part of history, to know the real history, and then we can see how these, liberal may be hoodwinked in the present day. I mean, I think like the way they go after, Trump, like with the Russiagate, a lot of the opposition to Trump was kind of phony, and you can compare that to Watergate, and that's why we're uncontrolled opposition, because a lot of the opposition is these controlled, coordinated events like Watergate. I mean, there were legitimate reason to oppose Nixon, but what the left doesn't want to wind up supporting a neoconservative coup, so we shouldn't be hoodwinked by these theatrics.
Yes. And Jeremy, we have to wrap up. So please tell our audience how they can follow your work.
My work can be followed on Substack, Too Hot for the Mainstream, Covert Action Magazine, and my website, jeremykuzmarov.com. And I have a new book on political assassinations, The Intricate Nexus of Deep State Crime, that should be released this week or next week.
Wow.
So check that out.
Definitely. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI or the Pacifica Foundation. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week.
All right. I think we can wrap it up then.
Wrap.
Great
Yeah,
show.
you got everything. You
Yeah.
okay there, Jamie?
Very interesting stuff.
We got enough meat there? Or do we have
I
to?
think so. I think
a little
we got
extra in?
enough. I should be able to get that one in there. So
Okay.
we'll cut
Okay.
that up this week and then have it up next Tuesday for you guys.
Great
Great.
topic, Jeremy. Really, I had no idea before I did the research for the show. I was like, "What am I going to say about this? What happened?" And then, wow, what a rabbit hole! It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how you're bringing in all these guests who were there at these historical events, and a lot of these things have been pigeonholed or memory holed.
Yeah.
Just,
It's nice.
people just forgotten about this stuff, and they're still relevant
I don't
today.
think it was really ever known the full story. It only came out over time, and it's really just in some obscure historical books that don't get a wide readership because they're never promoted anywhere in the mainstream. So most of the public really would have no way of knowing the real story.
And these stories are they're older stories. I mean, things that happened 40, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, but they're still relevant today. I mean, these things that happened were laying the groundwork and the foundations for the stuff that is the terrible stuff that's happening now.
Absolutely.
And we're getting people who were there with firsthand accounts of it. And I think that's a really awesome part of the show. So
Yeah, definitely.
and we've got some of the people we've been interviewing. That might be the last interview they ever did, too. You know, I mean,
Well, in the case of the guy from Vietnam,
well, some are getting on in years, so it's important to interview them now because, like, he was revealing some stuff that's not in any books, and is important information related to these receipts and how they were left in the car, and E. Howard Hunt and his role in the Miami station and his connection with the FBI, and how this guy Dardis, who tipped off Woodward. That's I don't think that's mentioned in any book, even these critical books. It's added information that would enhance the argument as the few critical texts. And then unfortunately the historical profession is very corrupt and hides it, just like pretends that these books were never written, like the Hugin and the Bryant book, which are actually rich in documentation and evidence and have very good logical arguments and explanations, but they're censored, just like
inconvenient truth.
Yeah, and so kids don't learn the real history.
It's very important to get it on the record, and like especially if you go to our podcast library, it's just a lot of these subjects are covered there, and a lot of great details from eyewitness accounts or
and some of our podcasts
that were near the events
have an enduring value, as historical testimonies and stuff on Pearl Harbor, the USS Liberty. So
absolutely, and that's why we keep doing this show.
Yeah,
we're certainly not doing it for the money. People, we need money here. We're
we cover both current events and historical events. So.
Simultaneously. Yeah, but you can always send in a super chat or Rumble rants. Those are great. We love those, and I know our audience is growing too because Pasta's been doing drive time every morning from 8 to 10 a.m. and he took today off though, but I think he's back tomorrow, and so that's his show's growing. That's helping get us more viewers, which is great. And if you're wondering why we're on Pasta to Go, because he's the executive producer of this show. He started the show with Jeremy, and then handed it off to Gloria over a year ago, almost 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, we've been doing this for a while now, right?
Yeah,
I
almost 2
think we're
years
going to
ago
be
since you
2
took
years in
over.
November.
Yeah. So,
Okay, I think we better cut it off because we
Yeah,
don't.
sounds good.
All
so
right.
we'll
That's
wrap
how
it up.
all our
next time.
secrets also.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Gloria. And thanks to you for watching. We'll be back next week with another episode. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
To